A single patch of burning grass beside a road may have triggered one of the most destructive wildfire disasters in Washington state history. Within hours, flames were racing across dry fields, crossing roads, surrounding neighborhoods, and forcing tens of thousands of people to abandon their homes. Entire streets were reduced to ash. Sports fields burned. Patients were moved from medical facilities. Animal shelters rushed to evacuate every animal in their care. And as more than 1,000 firefighters fought 3 major fires around Spokane, investigators announced a development that changed the story completely. A 37-year-old man had been arrested on suspicion of intentionally starting one of the fires, but the arrest does not mean the full mystery has been solved. Authorities have connected the suspect only to the Old Trails fire. The causes of the other major fires remain under investigation. The true scale of the damage is still being calculated. Some neighborhoods remain difficult to enter, and thousands of residents are waiting to learn whether they have homes to return to. This is the story of how a dangerous weather forecast, exceptionally dry vegetation, powerful winds, and one suspected act of arson combined to create a historic emergency on the edge of Spokane. The disaster began on Saturday, August 1st, 2026. Spokane is the second largest city in Washington state. It sits in the eastern part of the state, surrounded by grasslands, forests, rural roads, and fast-growing communities. These areas form what fire experts call the wildland-urban interface. It is the place where houses, businesses, and public facilities meet land covered by trees, brush, and grass. Under normal conditions, a small fire in such an area can sometimes be stopped quickly, but conditions around Spokane were not normal. The region had endured prolonged heat and extremely dry weather. Grass and brush had lost much of their moisture. In some areas, vegetation had become so dry that it could ignite almost immediately from a spark or open flame. At the same time, strong winds were moving across eastern Washington. Before the fires exploded, the National Weather Service issued an unusually serious warning known as a particularly dangerous situation red flag warning. A normal red flag warning means that strong winds, low humidity, and dry vegetation could allow fires to start easily and spread rapidly. The addition of the words particularly dangerous situation signaled an even more extreme threat. Forecasters believed that any new fire could grow quickly, become difficult to control, and threaten populated areas. It was an extraordinary warning for Washington. But even the warning could not show exactly where a fire might start, or how quickly it could reach a neighborhood. Then 3 major fires emerged on the western and northwestern sides of Spokane. They became known as the Old Trails Fire, the Fairview Fire, and the Autumn Lane Fire. Together they formed what officials called the Spokane Complex. The Old Trails Fire began near a roadside area west of Spokane. According to investigators, a community member saw a man behaving suspiciously near dry grass close to where the fire started. The witness reportedly saw the man crouched beside the road. His behavior appeared unusual enough that the witness later contacted authorities. That decision may have given investigators their most important early lead. The fire rapidly moved away from its point of origin. Wind pushed flames through grass, brush, and developed areas. Burning material was carried ahead of the main fire. Small spot fires appeared beyond roads and other barriers that might normally slow the flames. Once homes began burning, the disaster changed. This was no longer only a vegetation fire. Houses, vehicles, fences, sheds, utility poles, and other structures became additional fuel. A wildfire can produce enormous amounts of heat, but a neighborhood fire creates another layer of danger. Burning homes release embers that can travel through the air and ignite other structures. Propane tanks, vehicles, and building materials can intensify the flames. Firefighters may be able to defend one house, but when several homes ignite at once, crews can be overwhelmed. The priority quickly shifts from saving property to saving lives. Evacuation orders expanded across communities west and northwest of Spokane. Washington uses a 3-level evacuation system. Level 1 means residents should be aware of danger and begin preparing. Level 2 means they should be ready to leave at a moment's notice. Level 3 means go now. Do not wait. Do not collect additional belongings. Do not remain behind to watch the fire. Thousands of residents received Level 3 orders as flames approached roads and neighborhoods. Some people had time to pack important documents, medications, clothing, and family photographs. Others left with almost nothing. They placed children and pets inside vehicles and joined lines of traffic moving away from the fire. Smoke reduced visibility. Roads became crowded, Emergency vehicles needed space to move toward the flames while residents were trying to move in the opposite direction. The number of people affected rose dramatically. Initial estimates described thousands of evacuees. Later reports placed the number under evacuation orders at more than 60,000. Some estimates reached approximately 67,000 people. For Spokane and the surrounding county, this was a mass displacement event. The fires also threatened people who could not simply enter a car and drive away. Patients requiring continued medical care had to be transferred or moved to protected locations. A Veterans Affairs facility moved patients as the danger increased. Some were transported to local hospitals, while others were placed in shelters where medical staff could continue monitoring them. These evacuations required ambulances, trained personnel, medical records, medications, and careful coordination. Moving medically vulnerable patients during a wildfire is far more complicated than evacuating an ordinary building. Every delay matters, but moving too quickly without proper support can also put lives at risk. At the same time, the Spokane Humane Society evacuated the animals in its care. Shelters face unique problems during disasters. Some animals are frightened by smoke, sirens, and unfamiliar people. Others require medication or specialized transportation. Large numbers of cages, food supplies, and records must be moved quickly. Officials later reported that the animals were successfully relocated and safe. The fires also reached public spaces. Video showed flames moving through the Dwight Merkel Sports Complex, where a major volleyball event had been taking place. Games were stopped. The complex was evacuated. Fields and facilities that normally represented recreation and community life were surrounded by smoke and fire. Gonzaga University opened dormitory rooms to people affected by the disaster, including workers who had lost housing or could no longer safely return home. Emergency shelters were established, and community groups began collecting food, clothing, and other supplies. But while relief efforts expanded, the fires continued to grow. The Old Trails fire burned thousands of acres as it moved toward suburban areas. The Autumn Lane fire also expanded rapidly and remained highly active. The Fairview fire added another dangerous front. More than 10,000 acres were burned across the 3 incidents during the early days of the emergency. At one point, officials reported no meaningful containment around the major fires. Containment does not mean that a fire has been extinguished. It refers to the percentage of the fire perimeter that crews believe will prevent further spread. A fire can continue burning inside a contained area. Zero containment means firefighters do not yet have a reliable control line around any significant portion of the perimeter. That does not mean crews are doing nothing. Firefighters may be protecting homes, rescuing residents, clearing roads, constructing fire lines, and stopping individual sections of the blaze. But under strong winds, one uncontrolled section can send the fire into a new area. The Spokane Valley Fire Department placed 72 firefighters on duty in a single day, reportedly the highest staffing level for one day in the department's history. Crews arrived from other areas of Washington and from across the country. Specialized wildfire engines, aircraft, bulldozers, and incident management teams were brought into the response. More than 1,000 firefighters eventually joined the battle, with additional personnel expected. The crisis was so serious that the Spokane fires became one of the highest firefighting priorities in the United States. That designation matters because wildfire resources are limited. During a severe national fire season, many states may request the same aircraft, crews, and equipment. Officials must decide where those resources are needed most urgently. Washington was already experiencing an extremely active season. State officials reported more than 1,000 fires during 2026, with hundreds of thousands of acres burned. Across the Pacific Northwest, the total burned area had climbed into the millions of acres. Large fires were also burning in Idaho, Oregon, Utah, and other western states. This meant Spokane was not facing its disaster in isolation. It was competing for help during a widespread regional emergency. Governor Bob Ferguson declared a state of emergency. Spokane County issued its own emergency declaration. The Washington National Guard was activated to support evacuations, traffic control, and firefighting operations. A statewide burning ban was ordered on certain lands, and officials repeatedly warned residents not to conduct any activity that might create another ignition. During extreme fire conditions, common activities can become dangerous. A trailer chain dragging on pavement can throw sparks. Hot vehicle parts can ignite dry grass. Outdoor equipment can strike rocks. A discarded cigarette can start a fire. Target shooting, campfires, debris burning, and machinery use can all produce heat or sparks. When vegetation is extremely dry and winds are strong, a small mistake can become a disaster before anyone has time to react. But investigators soon began to believe that the old trails fire may not have started by accident. They focused on the information provided by the community witness. Authorities identified the suspect as 37-year-old Spokane resident Aaron F. Farinacci. Sheriff John Knowles said investigators believe Farinacci used matches or a lighter to ignite dry grass beside a road. When law enforcement officers located him, he was reportedly within approximately 1 mile of the suspected ignition area. Authorities said he was carrying matches and a butane lighter. He was arrested and booked on suspicion of first-degree arson. A judge set his bond at $1 million. The charge is an accusation, not a conviction. Farinacci is legally presumed innocent unless prosecutors prove the allegation in court. Investigators will need to establish more than the fact that he was near the area or possessed items capable of starting a fire. They must connect him to the ignition through evidence. That evidence may include witness statements, video recordings, physical evidence from the suspected origin point, the suspect's movements, phone location data, statements made during questioning, and expert analysis of how the fire began. Fire origin investigations are difficult. After a major wildfire, the place where the flames started may be heavily damaged. Vehicles and firefighting crews may have moved through the area. Wind may have scattered debris. The fire itself may have destroyed evidence. Investigators therefore work backward. They examine burn patterns, the direction flames traveled, the way vegetation was consumed, witness videos, emergency calls, weather records, and the timing of the first smoke reports. Their goal is to narrow a massive burned area down to the smallest possible point of origin. Only then can they determine whether the likely cause was natural, accidental, mechanical, electrical, or intentional. The arrest was a major development, but it also created confusion. Some reports describe the suspect as being connected to the devastating Spokane wildfires in general. That wording can make it appear that authorities believe one person started all 3 major fires. They have not publicly established that. Farinacci is accused in connection with the Old Trails fire. The causes of the Fairview and Autumn Lane fires remain under investigation. Investigators will examine whether the fires began independently, whether there was any connection between them, and whether human activity played a role. Until evidence is released, it would be irresponsible to claim that all 3 fires were intentionally started or caused by the same person. The distinction is important because the disaster was created by more than ignition alone. Even when a person starts a fire intentionally or accidentally, the final scale of destruction depends on environmental conditions. On August 1st, the landscape around Spokane was ready to burn. The humidity was low. Vegetation was dry. The wind was powerful enough to push flames and embers across long distances. Communities had been built close to areas containing continuous grass and brush. Multiple fires started during the same dangerous weather period, dividing emergency resources. This combination turned separate incidents into a regional catastrophe. By Monday and Tuesday, weather conditions began to improve. Winds weakened as an area of high pressure moved toward the region. The calmer conditions gave firefighters an opportunity to work closer to the fire perimeter, strengthen control lines, and protect communities. But the change in weather brought a different danger. High pressure can trap smoke close to the ground. Even if flames spread more slowly, air quality can become worse. Smoke from wildfires contains extremely small particles that can travel deep into the lungs and enter the bloodstream. Children, older adults, pregnant women, and people with asthma, heart disease, or lung conditions face the greatest risk. But heavy smoke can affect healthy adults as well. Residents may experience coughing, headaches, eye irritation, breathing difficulty, fatigue, and chest discomfort. Spokane officials warned people to avoid unnecessary driving because visibility could change rapidly as smoke moved across roads. Residents were advised to keep windows closed, use air filtration when possible, and follow official air quality reports. The visible destruction was already enormous. More than 700 structures were initially reported destroyed. Later assessments suggested that more than 1,100 structures may have been destroyed or damaged across the Spokane fires. The numbers may continue to change. Early damage estimates after a wildfire are often incomplete. Officials may count buildings from aircraft or satellite images before ground teams can safely enter neighborhoods. Some structures reported as destroyed may be severely damaged but still standing. Others may not be identified until roads reopen. The word structure also does not always mean a house. It can include garages, barns, sheds, commercial buildings, and other facilities. but behind every number is a personal loss. A destroyed home is not simply wood, metal, and concrete. It may contain decades of family photographs, legal documents, heirlooms, furniture, clothing, and memories that cannot be replaced. Some residents returned to find chimneys standing above piles of ash. Vehicles had burned down to metal frames. Trees were blackened. Utility lines were damaged. Entire blocks looked almost unrecognizable. Insurance may eventually pay for part of the rebuilding process, but recovery can take years. Families must locate temporary housing, replace identification documents, contact lenders, arrange schooling for children, recover medications, and navigate complex insurance claims. People who rented homes may have fewer financial protections than homeowners. Those without adequate insurance may face permanent displacement. Small businesses may lose buildings, equipment, inventory, and customers at the same time. Even homes that survive can remain uninhabitable because of smoke damage, unsafe water, electrical problems, or damaged roads. There is also the psychological impact. Evacuees may replay the moment they left. They may wonder whether they should have taken more belongings or departed earlier. Children may become frightened by smoke, wind, or emergency alerts long after the immediate danger passes. Firefighters and emergency workers can also experience trauma after witnessing destroyed communities and working under extreme pressure. As of the latest official reports, no firefighter deaths or major firefighter injuries had been confirmed. Authorities initially said there were no confirmed civilian deaths, although officials warned that the situation could change as crews gained access to burned areas. Hundreds of people were at one point reported unaccounted for, but most were later located. During a mass evacuation, a missing person report does not always mean someone is trapped inside the fire zone. Families become separated. Phone networks become overloaded. Residents leave for different shelters or stay with friends without immediately notifying relatives. Still, every unresolved report must be treated seriously until the individual is found. The investigation into the suspected arson will continue at the same time as the firefighting operation. If prosecutors establish that the Old Trails fire was intentionally started, the legal consequences could be severe. First-degree arson generally involves knowingly and maliciously causing a fire under circumstances involving occupied structures or serious danger to human life. The final charges could depend on the evidence, the amount of property damage, whether anyone was injured or killed, and what investigators determine about intent. Additional federal charges may also be considered if federal land, facilities, or resources were affected, although no such charges should be assumed until authorities announce them. The arrest may answer one question about how the Old Trails fire began, but it cannot explain the entire disaster. The deeper question is why one ignition was able to threaten a major American city and destroy hundreds of structures so quickly. The answer lies in the connection between weather, landscape, development, emergency resources, and human behavior. Spokane experienced an extreme fire weather event in a region where neighborhoods meet dry grass and forest. The wind transformed flames into a fast-moving front. Multiple fires stretched available resources. Smoke complicated movement and communication, and a suspected human action may have provided the spark at the worst possible moment. For residents, the emergency is not over when the flames disappear. Firefighters must extinguish hot spots that can continue burning underground or inside damaged structures. Utility crews must inspect power lines. Engineers must determine whether roads, bridges, and public buildings are safe. Authorities must remove dangerous trees and unstable debris. Water systems may need testing. Families must begin the long process of returning, rebuilding, or deciding whether to leave permanently. The coming investigation will determine whether Aaron Farinacci is legally responsible for starting the Old Trails fire. Separate investigations will attempt to establish what caused the Fairview and Autumn Lane fires. Officials will also review how evacuations were communicated, whether firefighting resources arrived quickly enough, and how communities can reduce the danger before the next extreme fire weather event. Those questions matter because Spokane's experience may not be an isolated disaster. Across the western United States, more homes are being built near flammable landscapes. Hotter and drier conditions are increasing the number of days when fires can spread rapidly. Fire departments are being asked to defend larger communities during seasons when many states are burning at the same time. The Spokane fires show how quickly the boundary between a wildfire and an urban disaster can disappear. On one side of that boundary is dry grass. On the other is a neighborhood. Under calm conditions, they may coexist for decades. Under powerful winds and extreme dryness, the distance between them can be crossed in minutes. For the thousands of people who fled Spokane, the most important fact was not who started the fire. It was whether their families could escape in time. For investigators, the central question is whether the old Trails fire was a deliberate act. For firefighters, the goal is to stop the remaining flames before the weather becomes dangerous again. And for the wider community, the question will remain long after the smoke clears. How can a city prepare for a disaster in which one small flame, whether accidental or intentional, can destroy an entire neighborhood before anyone has time to understand what is happening?